standard one, this man and this woman, from whom it all came. What's that have to do with sexual orientation? It wasn't even on their minds. So to read sexual orientation into the Adam and Eve story is taking your ideas and reading them in. They're not in there. Another way to answer this argument, and I like it because it's really funny, the Bible always talks about heterosexuality, never homosexual. Therefore, there must be something that the Bible doesn't like about homosexuality. How many of you know stories in the Bible that have to do with dogs? A mention of a dog.
We're talking about circumcision, dogs.
Okay, Paul writes about the dogs. Okay. Remember the rich man and the poor man? Lazarus is sitting outside the rich man, and the dogs are licking his wounds and throwing the food to the dogs. And there's dogs all over. How many of you know a place in the Bible where cats are mentioned? There is none. There's one place in the book of Baruch that's not included in all the scriptures, and it talks about cats roaming the temples of Babylon. Therefore, the Bible approves of dogs and opposes cats, and we should go out and rid all our neighborhoods of the cats because God is against cats. You see how stupid that is? That's the same argument as this. The Bible always talks about heterosexuality and not homosexuality, therefore we've got to get rid of homosexuals. In other words, this is all there is. These arguments, it's misread, we don't know what these mean, and that's a mistaken argument. I'm going to look at these, because there's something there. I have been presuming this all along, what I'm calling historical critical understanding. Notice how I keep appealing to history, what the word meant when it was written, not what it means to us when we read it.
Right.
That's the key to this. And here's the point. I had a friend, Mike Baffin, who made cartoons of this stuff, but the publisher wouldn't put it in. It said it makes the book look too frivolous. This is so apt these days. Let me tell you a story to make my point. Jesus and Satan, sibling rivalry. For eternity they're fighting in heaven, and God is getting sick of it. They're fighting over computers and who can do the computer work better than the other. And God says, we have had enough of it. We're going to settle this once and for all. We will get a computer, 2 Dell computers from down on Earth, and an Earth clock. You will have 1 Earth hour, the both of you, to work on the computer, and we will see what you get done. Whoever does more can do it better, and that will be the end of the discussion, and we will hear no more of it. They agree. They set up the computers. They're doing their work, working away frantically. Jesus and say, well, wouldn't you know it, the angels decided that they wanted to bowl. You know, when the angels are bowling, lightning and thunder and all. The electricity goes down. The computers go down. But of course it's heaven, so quickly they come back again. And Satan and so back, and God says, okay, time is up. So Satan, God says, let's see what you got. He pushes the enter button and he prints out, here was 1 fax and a little bit of a word processing document he got going. Jesus, what do you do? Oh, he's got facts and graphics and spreadsheets and all kinds of reams and reams of stuff coming up. And God says, okay, it's over. It's clear that Jesus is better than this. Satan says, not fair, not fair. I mean, the electricity went down. If only, if only I had what I had. He says, you have to remember, Jesus saves. Now you're laughing at sacred words. Why? Do you see that the whole meaning of that word, Jesus saves, was changed by the context I put it in? That's what this stuff is about. You can understand the words but miss the point if you don't know the culture that it's coming out of. I'm seeing this black dude over here who knows a lot about his Bible. I bet he knows words that none of us can understand in this culture. I mean, they have ways of talking that we're not into. And if you come to your own other cultures, that's what's at stake in these issues. There is no such thing as a literal reading. To read, to interpret, means that you pick up the words and it goes in your mind. Without a mind, there is no meaning. And depending on who's reading it, you might get different interpretations. We argue over stuff like that all the time. Talk to an English major. I mean, they make a living on arguing over what words mean. This thing, I just threw this in, that's some history. The literal reading is not really the Bible. It's Luther and Calvin's Reformation theology, and the fundamentalists don't know that, because for the most part they don't know any history. A lot of the stuff that they're talking about, that is all Luther and Calvin. It's not in the Scriptures. Two ways of looking at the Scriptures. There are lots of ways that people through the centuries have used the Scriptures. Inspiration is a fine example. And it's legitimate, except unless you start taking your inspiration and trying to impose it on everybody else. If it helps you, great. Go with it. But don't think you have to make everybody else agree with you. But the two ways I want to look at are these: the supposed literal reading and the historical critical reading. Notice this. All of the mainline churches follow this, except they don't like the conclusions. And that's what's going on in the Anglican Church, and that's what's going on in the Catholic Church, and that's going on to some extent in all the others. They will all admit that this is how you ought to read the Scriptures, but they have to discredit everything I'm saying, because if they followed it, they'd have to give up their opinion. And this is not just on homosexuality. It's on who was Jesus. It's on did he found a church or not? How many sacraments are they and what do they do? What about marriage and divorce? All of these issues are up for grabs when you start putting the text back into the original historical context. And that's why the churches are so upset these days. The thing is ready to collapse because we have learned too much in the last century. And now we're able to go back to see what they really meant when they originally wrote it, instead of what we made of it through the centuries. And a lot of what they originally meant is not what we made of it. And historians are clever enough now to be able to see the difference. Notice that this is a method. It has rules. Pick it up and read it, and that's what it means. And what do? You do what it says. This has rules. Here's the point I want you to get. The text means what it meant to those who wrote it, first of all. And secondly, you have to understand it and then apply the lesson, not the words. If we're supposed to just apply the words, we'd all be walking around in tunics and sandals, being like Jesus. No, that's not what it was about. Love one another as I have loved you. That means very different things today than it would have meant in his age. You apply the lesson. It's called historical because it relies on history. And it's called critical, not that you're trying finding faults. It means critical thinking. Ask questions, wonder. Say, what is this about? Why did they say it this way here and that way there? What's the difference? That's critical thinking. Do you see that these are two very different ways of approaching the Bible? They set up two very different religions. There are two very different notions of God involved in there. There's two very different notions of Jesus involved in there. There's whole world views, whole different approaches to life involved in those two different things. And that's why you're never going to convince somebody to change, because their world would literally fall apart. In charity and goodwill, you don't push people over the edge. Sometimes you have to when what they're doing is crazy, when they're out there murdering people and things of that nature. And to some extent, they're doing that to us. I mean, the AIDS epidemic went on for how many years before anybody ever did anything about it? They're murdering us. At that point, there comes we have to step in and do something. But for the most part, you kind of try to be nice to people. I used the example talking to Craig and Reuben about, Aunt Mary doesn't like certain words. Well, you don't say them around her. Not that they're bad. I mean, words are words. They can be used in good ways and bad ways. But if it's going to offend Aunt Mary, you don't use them when Aunt Mary's there. Well, that's the same thing in this case. Yeah. You find out what the thing actually means when it was original. You apply it to your own case, and you live it as it should be lived to make things go well. I've lost my train of thought, so if you're not following me, neither am I. But the point I'm making is this thing. Put it back into its original context. The story of Jesus saves is the whole point of this presentation. It's the whole key. I remember my thought. You're not going to convince them. Their whole world is built up in that. It's a whole different way of thinking. Here we are trusting that God gave us human intelligence and wants us to use it. Here they think God works miracles all the time and just told us what to do. Whether we believe it or not, whether we agree with it or not, you just do it. If we woke up tomorrow and God said all the commandments, where it says not, I'm going to say thou shalt, and where it says thou shalt, I'm going to say thou shalt not.